It's now a real honour to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Emma Shortis. Emma is the International and Security Affairs Director at the Australia Institute. She's an historian. She's written numerous books and has spent a lot of time in and thinking about the US in recent times. So we could all just kind of thank her for that, I suppose. Because it's hard work, but we can't really understand what's happening in the world if we don't think about the US. Emma, by the way, has a wonderful podcast called After America, which you can interpret whatever you want in that title. But Emma's going to talk to us now about the US and its changing influence in the world. Can you please join me in welcoming Dr. Emma Shortis?
Thank you, and thanks, Richard. In this time of monsters, to steal a line from Doug, the metaphors and the historical comparisons feel almost too cheap and too easy. The fanatical architects of Project 2025 that you might have heard of, the radical plan for Donald Trump's second presidency, had imagined their hero inheriting a world on fire. And in January, as the man who described himself as saved by God so that he could make America great again took the oath of office, the other side of the continent was, quite literally, on fire. As Trump delivered his inaugural address in Washington, Los Angeles was experiencing what was widely predicted to be the most expensive natural disaster in American history, surpassing even the US $200 billion in damage caused by Hurricane Katrina in the year 2000. 29 people died, more than 18,000 buildings were destroyed, and nearly 40,000 acres burnt in winter. As California Governor Gavin Newsom said, climate change means that there are no fire seasons anymore. And that has direct and immediate economic and security implications for us here in Australia. We have a long-standing firefighting exchange agreement with the United States and also with other nations in the Northern Hemisphere. So during the Black Summer bushfires, for example, the United States sent 4 fixed-wing aircraft and about 270 personnel to Australia to help fight those fires under our existing firefighting arrangement. So just take a moment to imagine what might have played out in California in January if those aircraft and personnel had been in Australia for our fire season. Or think through the consequences of those aircraft and those personnel not being available to us here in Australia if we had needed them in our traditional fire season, i.e. January. And we will need them again. If not this summer, then maybe another, or maybe in winter. That means that one of the very few things about our alliance with the United States that actually does make us safer, something that helps protect us from a very real and very growing threat, that is collapsing in real time. And Donald Trump is ideologically committed to not just speeding up that collapse, but to making it even more dangerous for everybody. He has, as we've already heard today, of course, unilaterally withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accords, as we always knew that he would. He has begun the process of opening up more oil fields and dramatically increasing US emissions. His attacks on climate action, climate science, and climate cooperation are happening at all levels, and the consequences are difficult to forecast or even really to imagine. I wanted to give you just one pretty small example, actually. In the last couple of weeks, the Trump administration ordered the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to pause all international engagements, so all of its international cooperation. According to Wired magazine, those orders extended to something called the National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Service. And in addition to gathering data from domestic sources, that service relies on a wide range of international partners. And that international weather and climate data is essential not only to air transportation safety, but also to combating drought, to monitoring coral reef destruction, and safeguarding railway shipping carriers against dangerous weather. which, I don't know, seems kind of important. And that's just one really small example. And to put that in its broader context, the Trump administration has also put a pause on all foreign aid, including on climate aid to the Pacific. He withdrew the United States from the World Health Organization and stopped all international collaboration on public health, which, as we know, climate change already threatens. And his threat to take over the Gaza Strip and force Palestinians who live there to leave would constitute a crime against humanity. And it would finally break whatever is left of the international rule of law, which is something on which multilateral climate action relies. So all of this is really to just say one thing, and I want to say it as clearly as I can. The Trump administration is now an active, direct threat to our security and the security of the world. And to the extent that we in Australia hide behind our alliance with the United States to condone its abandonment of action on climate, we are party to that threat to global security. Now, if Trump cares about the climate change-fueled fires in California and their threat to global security, it's only insofar as they were, as he actually said in his inaugural address, affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country. The fires are also, of course, politically useful to Trump because they allow him to traffic in his now brazenly segregationist messaging about the evils of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and feed the already long-burning fires of racism and sexism in America. Trump's insistence that white men, who are obviously the natural and rightful leaders of American society, cannot function in a society where women and non-white people are even visible. His talk of enemies of the state, vermin, and immigrants poisoning the blood of our country is all exactly what it sounds like. Trump reinforces more effectively than almost anyone else in America's modern era fascist ideas of who is in and who is out, who is American and who is not, who deserves safety and security and who does not. Trump's imperial ambitions have to be understood in this context. There are no clean dividing lines between what happens in the United States and the role it plays in the world, as much as we might wish that to be the case. Trump's vision for America as a growing nation, once more, a violent, relentless, and unforgiving power, is a projection of America's manifest destiny out into the world, and even beyond it. So for Trump, places like California and the Pacific Islands can be written off. The new frontier to him isn't this world, Mars is. That is the scale, though, of Trump's and of course Elon Musk's. That's the scale of their ego and ambition. Their sense of America is one that aims to conquer the world and even the universe. This is what we are dealing with. It is as overblown and stupid as it is deadly serious and frightening. It's historically consistent and logical, and yet nothing about what is happening is even close to normal. This is not the America that we thought we knew. That America, our greatest friend and ally, our trusted protector, benevolent leader of the free world, that never really existed. And Trump, as he does with so many things, just makes that new reality a lot harder to avoid. But reality is, or it should be, for most of us at least, unavoidable. The America we thought we knew is gone, and it isn't coming back. So, how do we respond? What do we do? It's easy, I think, and understandably so tempting to fall into cynicism and despair. Things are bad. They're really bad, especially in the United States. They're so bad that at the end of January, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists moved the doomsday clock from 90 to 89 seconds to midnight, which is the closest it's ever been. As they put it, because the world is already perilously close to the precipice, a move of even a single second should be taken as an indication of extreme danger and an unmistakable warning that every second of delay in reversing course increases the probability of global disaster. But that disaster, as we've heard so many times today, is not inevitable. Nothing is inevitable. As the board explained, we are in this situation precisely because, despite unmistakable signs of danger, national leaders and their societies have failed to do what is needed to change course. But doing what is needed is entirely possible, and we don't have to do it alone. We and the rest of the world along with us have choices. We have power. We have agency. We do not just have to weather whatever Trump's America throws at us. As the bulletin argued, in this world on fire, blindly continuing on the current path is a form of madness. But we can do things differently to how we've done them before. As we've heard today, what Australia does matters. Our choices matter. We can choose subordination and complicity, or we can choose something else. That would require some pretty significant courage, recognising that things are not the same as they once were and that pretending that they are is really dangerous. That requires bravery, and it requires integrity. It requires understanding and imagination. But as we've also heard today, that isn't what we have now, especially not from our leaders in this place. So as soon as it was clear that Donald Trump had won the presidential election in November last year, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese expressed his congratulations. He said that the government would work closely with the new Trump administration. And he noted that our nations are bound by a history of shared sacrifice, a commitment to common values. He didn't go into any detail about what common values we might share with Trump's America. And then after attending Trump's inauguration in January, Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong reflected on what an honour it was to have the privilege of attending the inauguration and being just a few seats back from watching the President speak. Then at the end of January, Defence Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles tweeted a photo of himself on the phone to newly confirmed Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth, with the Australian newspaper laid out in front of him, and wearing cufflinks depicting what looked remarkably like the Great Seal of the United States, a symbol of American sovereignty. What signal do we think the minister is trying to send with that? What are we doing? The commonly accepted wisdom in this place, the long-standing bipartisan consensus, is that we need to do things like this to keep us safe. We need our leaders to talk about our common values with Donald Trump. We need to understand being in his presence as an honour. We need our Deputy Prime Minister to wear cufflinks depicting the symbol of another nation to ensure that safety. We need the American security umbrella for our own protection, apparently no matter who is in the White House and no matter how much they assault our common values or the international rule of law. And that means we need the AUKUS submarine pact. We are told, to spend upwards, and I want to emphasise upwards, of $368 billion on perhaps 8 nuclear-powered submarines that we will probably never get. We need to hand over the decision-making power of future Australian governments to the United States, which is what AUKUS will do. While submarines might still work in a rising ocean, nothing about AUKUS will make us safer. It does precisely the opposite. Supporters of the AUKUS deal exaggerate threats to Australia while deliberately obscuring the real risks to the security of us and our region, risks including catastrophic climate change. But to our current leaders, that risk doesn't appear to matter much because we don't really consider things like climate change or the breakdown of the international rule of law as risks to our security. But that's what they are. So earlier this month, for example, the Australian Defence Minister was asked if Australia would support militarily Trump's attacks on the foundations of international law through something like a unilateral takeover of Panama or the annexation of Greenland. The best response that Defence Minister Richard Marles could muster was that our alliance with the US is really the cornerstone of our foreign policy. It's the cornerstone of our national security. No one in the current government is apparently able to say that such a move, or a US takeover of Gaza for that matter, would be a clear breach of the international rule of law. We are apparently making the choice to forego our responsibility to that rule of law and the significant risks to our security that come with that in order to keep Donald Trump on our side. What kind of security is that? What do we think security actually is? As Trump sets about dismantling what is left of the rules-based international order, destabilises the US and global economies, undermines public health, increases already rising inequality, unleashes white supremacy at home and abroad, deliberately accelerates catastrophic climate change, exactly as he told us he would, we need a better answer to that question about what security is, and we need it quickly. We can and we must think about security very differently. Australia has considerable power and agency. We could play a leadership role in building genuine global security by acting on climate change, on nuclear non-proliferation, on peace building, and on safeguarding the international rule of law. Instead, we consistently underestimate and undermine our own influence by refusing to acknowledge what we have and refusing to consider what we might do with it. We could choose to continue with our usual meaningless and cowardly gestures towards a kind of national security that is, in actual fact, no security at all. Or we could choose something else. Thank you.
Thanks for watching, and a very special thank you to all our supporters who help keep us running. We're not funded by political parties or fossil fuel companies or government, but by people like you who know the importance of evidence-based research in shaping the critical decisions facing Australia. If you'd like to support us to continue exposing inconvenient truths, challenging vested interests, and explaining the big issues in plain English, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution today. Visit our website australiainstitute.org.au to find out more.